What's poppin', people? It's Dante, currently on the streets of Philadelphia, headed for my morning walk towards the Schuylkill River Trail. It takes a fraction of a second to create a new world, right? Considering this thought this morning, as the light is so intriguing to me during these cloudy conditions or foggy conditions, you know, the world becomes ethereal, the world becomes surreal. And frankly, the world is surreal, right? Let's consider the Big Bang. Let's consider how this thing all started, right? It's a miracle, you know? I think that the world is so infinitely fascinating, and through the medium of photography, I believe the power lies in its ability to create anew, to treat the world as this canvas that is endless for you to explore and to essentially create a new world, right? I think that, you know, when it comes down to it, the photographs that we create, what we include within the frames themselves, become our interpretation of the world, you know, our depiction of the world, right? Where we reflect the world as a photographer, right? When we go out here and explore, we explore without preconceived notions. We're not expecting anything. We're merely responding with our intuition, looking at the world from this childlike perspective with fresh eyes. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to be infinitely surprised, right? Where every single day when you head out there with your camera, you really never know what you will find. And you know, perhaps this medium, photography, is a superpower because it enhances your curiosity. And maybe this is something that we lack in modern society, as we have, look at these giant construction sites, these big glass buildings. You know, you feel like you get like when I wake up in the morning, I instantly and just naturally, my body gravitates towards the river. You know, maybe the water, there's something about it, it just kind of pulls you in. But for me, the main reason that I walk this way is because when you walk on the grid, when you walk along the city streets first thing in the morning, you feel confined. You feel like you're sort of like trapped in a maze, and all these tall looming buildings kind of get in the way. And I am always looking for that open space. And so for me, the Schuylkill River Trail that's just down this way is that place for me. And I believe it provides me with this clarity. You know, speaking of clarity, you know, I think some of the key traits that a photographer must possess include courage, curiosity, intuition, and clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, you know, meaning to see clearly, to predict and understand the patterns that exist in both nature and human behavior. And, you know, perhaps what's amazing about photography is when you practice each and every day with repetition, you get to notice the way that light casts upon the surface and the way that people move on the streets. You almost become so in tune with the rhythm and the beat of the street that you can predict the moments that are always fleeting. And you merely position yourself right there, ready to press the shutter. It's more so, for me, photography, a physical sort of thing, right? Where it's like this physical pleasure and a visual game. And, you know, I believe that you don't really need to know much about the history of photography or compositional rules and guidelines and all these kind of things, but to actually almost intentionally break them all. I think this is where we can thrive and remain in this state of production, where my goal is to ultimately remain curious, is to ultimately go out there each and every day. And Philadelphia being my hometown, yeah, photographing in a way that enables me to do this. And so the solution that I found that is allowing this actually does require some guidelines, does require some restrictions or limitations. And I find that, you know, while it's good to break the rules, I believe that setting limitations is a good thing. And so the limitations that I set on myself are very simple. You know, I set my camera into an automated mode, into snap focus with the high contrast crank to the max, where essentially there's no need for processing, using the smallest JPEG file, boosting the sharp, the grain and all this like sort of stuff, you know, just embracing that gritty, raw sort of aesthetic. It allows me to photograph with speed. It allows me to go out there each and every day and to see things in a nuanced way where I'm merely curious about light and shadow because of the gradual change that light provides over time, right? Like this water, like this river that's flowing, light changes. Each and every day is new, right? Like this morning I woke up and I was just curious, like, wow, when are the clouds gonna, you know, disappear? I looked out my window, all you see is fog, you know. I couldn't see beyond into the horizon, so I figured, you know, let me go out, let me explore regardless, you know, where the change of light, you know, just the way that it changes, you know, where I can make a photograph of this same tunnel each and every day. You know, I can make a photograph of this river every single day for the rest of my life, but I will never photograph this same river twice, you know, in the same way. You know, another key trait that a photographer must possess is agility. You know, the way that you move on the street, the physicality. You know, I believe that this is also something worth considering, right? To be agile, to be physical, you know, while exploring. You know, you have to take risks. You know, you have to take risks, you have to be playful. You know, where I've experienced a lot of the world through my camera, I've experienced a lot of different places, cultures, and faces, right? Where, you know, I spent a lot of time on the road with the camera. And what I've realized is, if you take yourself so serious, you know, if you're out there and you appear to be this like serious documentary photographer and put on this like facade and like are standoffish and not open and honest, well, yeah, that's not going to work out for you. But for me, what I've learned right away was, you know, when I traveled to a new place, when I arrived in Jerusalem, actually I remember in 2017 I arrived in Jerusalem and I was studying abroad at Hebrew University, and the first time I set out with my camera to photograph was around the old city. And there was, you know, a group of young Jewish men, and they were gathered around the outskirts. And I remember for the first time trying to communicate. You know, I was taking the Ulpan course, trying to learn Hebrew, you know, manishmach, you know, manishma, you know, like shalom, you know, trying to speak Hebrew. Very difficult language, seems nearly impossible to learn. Maybe you just have to be, you know, over there for a long period of time to learn it. But essentially, because I had that lack of communication skills, I used the Instax camera and was merely just like this playful photographer from day one. And that's just something that I naturally started to do, was I would, you know, engage with people playfully through physicality, through your body language, through how you present yourself. And then, yeah, gifting portraits, gifting these Instax prints, you know, to strangers. And then from there, you can start to make candid photos with your, you know, real camera, if you will, right? And so this practice, this process taught me about the universality of photography, you know, being this language. And so considering photography as this universal language, you know, returning to black and white, returning to light and shadow, maybe I can return to the roots of the medium and have a new dialogue with the world, you know, by creating my own reality. But I think that this is where the magic happens, is where you're merely following this playful childlike spirit. And maybe, you know, photography is something that's just so accessible to all, where if you want to have, you know, an engaging experience in life, maybe to just snapshot your way through life is a wise notion. It's really wet in the grass. Let me get out of here. You know, where you don't take it so seriously. You're not out there taking it so seriously. Like, while I've photographed humanity, while I've experienced places on this close and intimate level where, you know, I've slept on the floors of mosques for weeks. You know, I learned about Islam. I traveled to the villages in Zambia and slept on the floors of these tents that were erected by sticks and tarps, and spent weeks there, you know, under the stars. You know, maybe under the stars, this is where imagination is born. Maybe the reason why Christianity is so popular amongst the tribes in Zambia is because there is this sort of disconnect to the modern world, in a way, where maybe in modernity we turn to science much more, but in villages there's even just like more like mystic kind of notions and ideas that exist. Like, I remember this time when I wanted to go to the lake, and my host mother was like, "Oh, like, don't go in the lake." Like the woman would always warn you, like, do not go in that lake. Like, Lake Bangweulu is dangerous. Like, there are magic crocodiles. Like, they would consistently talk about like magic and like witchcraft, and like how like this child was like eaten by a crocodile, and like nobody saw it happen, and it was just like magic. Or like they had this idea of like the flying coffin, or like the floating coffin or something, and if somebody died and they believed it to be due to the causes of like witchcraft or something, they would run around the village with the coffin on their heads, and the first house it would bump into, and if it was, something about the coffin and carrying the coffin throughout the village, and the first house that they stumble across that the coffin sort of bumps into, yeah, they essentially like take the person out and condemn them as a witch and stone them to death. And I'm not saying that this is, like, it's just interesting. Like, I think that this has nothing to do with my initial thought, but regardless, it's interesting. And so, yeah, what's amazing to me though about the village and life there is how prosperous the families are, right? Where like each household has around 10 children. And maybe my thought about Christianity is that it promotes the family. It promotes more children to be made. It promotes this sort of communal, life where there's this hierarchy that exists between God, tribe, and land. And amongst the tribe and amongst the family within the tribe, everybody has a role to play, where the mother comes home with firewood on her head, babies on her back. The men are building homes and churches. The boys are building bricks with sand and mud. The girls are sweeping the floors, preparing the food for the day. Everyone really does have this role to play. in these functioning villages where, you know, the houses may topple over due to inclement conditions or hurricanes, but the next day everybody gathers and everybody rebuilds again. You know, they all come together and build the home and allow their neighbors to stay within their homes if one topples over. You know, where I witnessed towards the end of my Peace Corps service, these homes began to topple because of the weather. You know, my neighbor was rebuilding his home for the next 2 weeks because a part of the wall was destroyed during a storm. But the families stay strong and they stick together, and it's all surrounded by the church. It's all surrounded by the center of town, that common belief, that common ideology. But maybe going forward in modern society here in the United States of America, we must transcend ideology. We must transcend all basic dogmas, philosophies, and maybe go beyond these modes of living in order to thrive. And so one of my ideas about hell was that hell was, you know, this threat within the medieval world to keep everyone in line, to keep everyone in check, you know, where you're threatened and condemned to go to hell if you mess up, if you commit these mortal sins, if you don't do these certain things. You know, and maybe this idea of hell just kept everybody in check to do what they were supposed to, you know, whether they were you know, the king or the peasant. Morning, man. I always see that guy. That dude's cool. He's always biking with his mask on because it's so cold when you ride, like the ski mask and stuff, and sunglasses. Actually, the sunglasses while biking, I think is critical because a lot of gnats and flies get in your eyes. And even when I wear them, they still get in my eyes. It sucks. And so, yeah, maybe biking is like it's just a good hobby for any photographer. Like for me in Philadelphia, it just makes sense because we have the trail here. You know, it's like this trail is just so accessible, and honestly, it seems like it's one of the greatest bike trails. Like, I mean, I've not explored many different bike trails in my life, but I've been riding the same trail since I was a little boy, and I still find it to be so exciting and interesting, and it just goes endlessly. Like, you can continue riding all the way from Center City, Philadelphia to Valley Forge and beyond. You know, the Schuylkill River is very long. I mean, I wonder how long it goes, like all the way up to Reading or wherever the Schuylkill ends. I believe, you know, it just keeps going. I actually spoke to this photographer on the river trail a few days ago, and he was photographing birds, and I was like, yo man, you see anything interesting today? And he told me about, he had his bike with him, and he told me that he actually biked from here to Valley Forge one day, and he slept in a hammock overnight and then kept going, which sounds fun. Like, it sounds like something I would do in a way. Like, maybe that would be like a fun thing to do one day. I don't know. I think that the hammock is like a great way to relax. I remember setting up my hammock in the village in Zambia and sort of just chilling out by a tree. The other thing that's great about trees is they're accessible and useful in terms of like fitness and weightlifting, whatever you want to call it. Fitness, calisthenics, where you can throw up, you know, just 2 gymnastic rings and start knocking out pull-ups, doing different calisthenic movements, dips, L-sits, try to do the planche, you know, all sorts of stuff. Like, I think that the gymnastic rings and throwing them up in just a tree, you know, that helped me stay on top of my fitness during a time where I had a lack of protein and was primarily actually only eating carbohydrates during my time in Zambia, because You know, in these villages, their staple food is maize, and so I was basically just eating like corn all day, every day, and fish, right? And we would eat fish. I've eaten bugs. I don't think we want to eat bugs. This is not good. Bugs, while you can eat them, and the grasshoppers, they got some protein to them. Yeah, I have no desire to consume these things. But yeah, I think what I actually liked the most was the fish guts. So I would always ask for more supu. You know, they would have this like typically serving of the maize, the ubwali, and the fish. And with the fish and the ubwali, to make it a little bit more flavorful, you know, you use all the different parts. They would mash up the guts of the fish, and it would create this little soup. And I'm telling you, it was good. Like, it was super good. I was like, what is that? But the best food that I remember eating in Zambia was actually their chicken, which is surprising because I hate chicken. I think chicken is disgusting, but maybe it's just the chicken that we have in the United States. You know, where I remember going and buying chickens that were alive, you know, just fresh right there, and then coming home, slaughtering it, preparing it, plucking the feathers with my host brothers and throwing it in the boiling pot and then cooking it over the fire. And that was delicious. You know, I think it was because the chickens themselves were free range. They weren't constrained. You know, they weren't slaughtered in a slaughterhouse. You know, like I used my knife. You know, I followed through and like had my hands on the product, and it tasted so good. And then the other great thing was this food called ifistachi, which was like the nuts, peanuts, like the peanut plant, and like the peanut leaves or something, and then was like mashed up and so good, almost like spinach, but better actually. And yeah, so I mean, maybe like the chickens that roam free in the villages in Zambia, we too should be like these chickens. You know, we spend all this money on the free range eggs. You know, you go to the grocery store, you see the different eggs. It's always the ones that are more expensive that are the best. You know, the free range, pasture raised, whatever the case. You know, I think that we should be consuming the best foods. You know, I think that this is something critical, right? Grass-fed beef, pasture-raised eggs or free-ranged eggs. You know, maybe we too should be free. Maybe we too should be roaming like the chickens in the village, kind of just under the sun in the open air. What I find most interesting is I spent more time inside than usually because it was raining. I mean, I still went out during the rain and walked around for a bit, but there was part of me that was like, okay, I'll spend this time as like an excuse for me to sequence photos and go through my work on my wall with these little prints and stuff. The issue is I really don't feel great when I'm inside. And I don't know if it's just me, but even if it's rainy or even if it's like shitty weather or like whatever, I genuinely feel 10 times better when I'm outside. So I know for a fact that I cannot be indoors for multiple hours at a time. That's just me. But I think that there is something about this, like maybe the modern way of life has conditioned us to be in cages, to be inside like these chickens in the factories. And yeah, maybe we should be outside of the cage more. And this is where I believe humans thrive. You know, where as a photographer, just think, like, look out your window, you know, like that's where life is. Like, you want to be on the front lines of life, you want to be outdoors. You know, it really does not matter where you may be, right? Where in Philadelphia, the streets may become mundane, but you know, when you walk the same lane every single day without expectations, you're fueled with this sense of abundance and gratitude for the simple things, right? Where the air is, you know, clean, you know, you can breathe these beautiful plants from the trees, and you have all this open space, you know, you have this nuance and change with the light, you know, the simple pleasures of life, right? Whether it's grass-fed beef, sunlight, being outside, walking, grass, open air. You know, maybe actually the way I'm starting to think more about like wealth, you know, health being wealth, the luxury being your time outside, or the privilege being your time outside. And then maybe there's this luxury of experience. You know, the experiences you have, you know, the stories that you sort of form in your head from these experiences and these memories and these like worlds that you can create through the photography that you make. You know, these experiences, you know, maybe are just a luxury in life. And yeah, maybe the experiences as a luxury, it's much more, you know, worthwhile than any sort of material thing. You know, where I can sit in silence, you know, up on this hilltop and replay a lot of experiences in my head that, you know, I don't even need a camera, I don't even need the photograph, or, you know, I've got images and visions in my own mind. But yeah, I think what's amazing about this space is like the patterns, right? Like looking at the like slope and the way that these sort of paths curve and bend, the rock formations. Like this to me is beauty. Like this is objective beauty, man. Like this is insane. This is incredible. I freaking love this place, this museum in the back. Oh man, it's a great day. You know, despite the sun being covered by the clouds and it being this sort of cloudy day or foggy day, it's warm today. I've got the vest. This is the utility or cargo, I think utility vest from Lululemon. What's great about the utility vest is this is their most lightweight one. And I think that vests are just great for photography because they provide you with a lot of space for different things. Like I've got in here my sketchbook from my travels and different photos in here. I've got a little water bottle. I actually have my kendama, and then there's zippers here for like GoPro zipper. I put my Ricoh, and then I'm reading Human All Too Human by Nietzsche. I've realized that I really do enjoy reading. The problem is I can't read inside. I just don't like being indoors. Hey squirrel. Yeah, but actually if I like sit up here, you know, just kind of look out with the view and read, feels much better. Just the sounds and view and the scene here, you know, it just reminds me how open the world is. You know, Philadelphia, it's like I feel as though going forward I can explore this place endlessly regardless, you know, where my curiosity, you know, that is the goal. You know, honestly, that's the goal. It's just to be curious, because the more curious you are, the more you will just go out there. That's all it is, honestly. And of course courage, but yeah, curiosity. That's really it. You know, you can create a new world in a fraction of a second. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, I actually believe that, you know, the other trade I was discussing with agility, physicality, you know, the way that I operate a Rico and a wrist strap, I believe is actually very similar to the way that I operate this kendama. And so maybe the kendama is just a great way to have that mind, body connection, you know, being this hand-eye, you know, this hand-eye coordination sort of like skill toy. You know, the way that I actually operate the camera and maneuver my body with agility on the street. Yeah, I believe it's actually very similar to using the kendama, where the kendama is essentially like a sword. I believe the word kendama derives from sword. And yeah, maybe we should wield our cameras like swords, strike through the heart of chaos, revealing the soul of the street to create visual order and harmony through the spontaneity of everyday life. I'm not a pro, but that's good, because there's always opportunity to learn. And I think with street photography, it's very endless, and you're always learning on the streets. And so I think the goal is to be curious and to actually forever remain an amateur, always learning. What a better place to learn than in the open world. Damn. Yeah. Kendama, kendama. I'll put some credits on the screen. See my name? Movie over. Here's the bike. Watch, it'll disappear. Whoosh.